Welcome to the lighter side of the spectrum, the podcast that celebrates the multiple hats we wear and the juggling acts we perform in life. Whether you're parenting kids and teens on the autism spectrum, navigating the ever-evolving healthcare industry, or building a more inclusive and impactful world, this is your space to find connection, inspiration, and growth. Together, we'll share stories, tackle challenges, and explore how innovation and inclusion create better outcomes for everyone. Because no matter the spectrum, there's always a lighter side. Now here's your host, David Coffer.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the lighter side of the spectrum. What if the most misunderstood part of special education isn't the disability, but the document that's supposed to support it? Today, we are going to be talking IEPs, how they help, how they sometimes hurt, and how we can make them actually work. And my guest today is someone who brings both heart and horsepower to the IEP conversation. Stephanie DeLussey is a dual certified special education and elementary education teacher with credentials in middle school math, ESL, and curriculum and instruction. She's taught in 5 different states across public and charter schools in every role from autism unit ESY teacher to high school instructional support facilitator. But what she has become known for now is the force behind Mrs. D's Corner and the Intentional IEP, where she helps teachers write better plans, advocate harder for students, and actually build IEP teams, instead of paperwork machines. Stephanie is also a mental health advocate who shares her personal journey with anxiety and PTSD to remind other educators they don't have to just survive this work, they can live it with purpose and presence. With all that, Stephanie, welcome to the podcast. It's great having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot to cover as we were talking about just before we started. So let's go ahead and just kind of start from the top. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how it led you to the Intentional IEP.
Yeah, so my journey in education has been anything but a traditional teacher journey in education. However, I am someone who has always wanted to be a teacher. Like there was never a time in life where I wanted to be anything else. And so I feel just truly made to do this work and work with students. And I always thought, I would get into my classroom and 35 years later, I would be there and retire and it would just be rah, 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 right? And that has not been my journey. I've taught in Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Texas, and I'm also certified in Georgia and the state of Florida. We move around a lot for my husband's job. We're currently in Florida and hopefully we're not moving anywhere soon. This is where we want to be. But I truly have taught everything within special education from K through 12. And, I started Mrs. D's Corner in December of 2011 when I couldn't find a teaching job in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And then I eventually did find a job and I did Mrs. D's Corner after my contract hours of being a teacher because I was writing all of these lessons and doing all of this work for my classroom and I just wanted to share it with other teachers. And so it then just kept growing and growing, and I forget the year it was, 2016 or 2017, I forget. I ended up leaving the classroom mid-year due to my own mental health. And in that journey of going through therapy and no longer being in the traditional classroom setting, I really struggled to find where I belonged still in education because in my mind, I was supposed to be in a classroom for 35 years and retire and
Right.
be there forever. And that's not what happened. And so that is kind of where the Intentional IEP was born out of, because I know that not every single special education teacher or parent loves IEPs. But
They don't? What?
No, I'm such a weirdo. I'm such a data nerd. Like if I could write IEPs for a living for other
Oh
people,
my God.
I would. Like that is how much that I love the documentation and just love everything about it. And so I'm fully aware that makes me a weirdo. I am a standalone most of the time on this, but that is truly where the Intentional IEP was born out of. I had a book called The Intentional IEP come out January of 2024. And so, my journey hasn't been traditional, but I wouldn't change it for a thing because here I am today.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's quite a journey. And there's different parts of it. I'd love to dive into it a little bit
Yeah,
more. But again, we'll kind of start with the IEP.
sure.
There are parents who may be listening, watching, who are just starting their IEP journey
Yeah.
and kind of walk them through that if you can. Because again, I remember was like, I didn't know, I'd never heard of an IEP.
Yeah.
Like all I knew was they told me, again, going back to, my son's now 19, but going back to the early days, they just said, hey, we're going to stick him in a developmental kindergarten class, and here's
Mhm.
his IEP. And we're like, okay. And we had no idea what to do. So how, again, for those parents who are starting their journey, kind of walk them through
Yeah.
that.
It's going to be different for every parent because so your child's going to be given a team essentially of professionals from the school, and you are going to be as the parent part of the team. The first thing that I want you to know is that you are probably the most vital person on that IEP team, and not a lot of schools are going to make you feel that way. But I am here to tell you that you are very valuable at the IEP team and at the IEP table, and things that you know about your student and things that you do at home and in the community with your child are valuable pieces of data that we can use in school to help them succeed, not only with academics, but socially, behaviorally, and just lifelong, because IEPs are for further education, employment, and independent living. And so, if nothing else that you take away from this podcast episode, just know that you truly are an inclusive, like integral part of an IEP team. So, your child's going to be given an IEP team. And that will change based off of what class they're in, what grade they're in. And so you're going to have different IEP teams throughout your child's journey in special education.
Right.
Every IEP team you're on is going to have a different dance, is the analogy that I like to
Mm.
use. Some are going to be easier to work with than others, and hopefully it is a good experience for you, but I know that often it is not. Even for teachers, it is not. But you're going to be given an IEP team. Your child's going to be going through evaluations. You have to give initial consent for your child to receive an evaluation. Your child's going to go through an evaluation and either be found eligible or not be found eligible. Now, if your child is found eligible, that's when they're going to get an IEP. And so then you as part of the IEP team with the IEP team are going to help write your child's first IEP. And so every year you're going to update the IEP, although you can have amendments, which means you can change the IEP at any time. Anything that you see in it can be changed at any time. It is a living, breathing document. And so I could go deeper than that, but I don't know how deep you
Yeah,
want
no,
to
no,
go.
this is great. I do want to touch on one thing that because
Yeah.
this came up also in a recent podcast where I was speaking with an education attorney, one that we actually ended up using in our fight against our school district,
Hmm.
and talking about IEPs that you don't need a professional diagnosis for your child to get an IEP.
Correct.
You can, right? So can you talk about that? Like, because you touched on that you could request an assessment. So maybe just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so doctors are the ones who are going to give you that like official diagnosis that your child has a disability, right? Doctors cannot, however, prescribe or say your school needs to give the child an IEP. Like that's just not that doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Schools, however, are going to provide that eligibility. Your child does not need to have a diagnosis to receive services under special education. So, under special education law, there are two requirements that a child needs to have to be found eligible for um,
For
having an
IEP
IEP.
or
Yep.
yeah.
And
Okay.
so, oh man, I'm gonna blank on him now that we're sitting here talking about
Yeah, sorry, I
it.
didn't mean to drop it.
So they have to have there are eligibility categories within
Okay.
the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So there are 13
Yeah.
disability categories.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into those. Your
No,
child has
no.
to be found eligible for one of those categories. Now, that may align, however, with a diagnosis you may have received. So if your child has autism, autism spectrum disorder is one of the 13 disability categories. So your child may be found eligible under that category. Again, there's speech only. I mean, we could go so deep into this. There's
Yeah,
speech only
yeah.
IEPs, other health impairment. I mean, there's so many categories. So your child has to be found eligible for one of the 13 disability categories, and then they have to also need special education services to make progress with the general education curriculum. And so basically what that means is they just have to be found eligible under one of the categories, and then they need additional supports and services and direct instruction from a special education teacher to make access or to be given access to and make progress with what their peers are learning. Let's say your child's in third grade, in that third grade classroom. And so that's how children are found eligible. So a doctor can't provide that eligibility for you.
Right.
However, your diagnosis from a doctor can get you access to like Medicaid and a bunch of other different things that the school IEP itself cannot give you access to. So they can work together, but you don't need one or the other to get an IEP.
So you are in the unique perspective of being able to talk about it from both as a teacher, being
Yeah.
on that side, but also as an advocate. And so I want to give you the opportunity to talk about it as a teacher, because a lot of times as parents, again, like, we're looking at from our viewpoint.
Yeah.
And you don't really understand what's required from a teacher. So can you kind of pull back the curtain and talk about, like, once you say, hey, the student needs an IEP,
Yep.
what happens from that point on for you as a teacher?
Yeah, so once a student is found eligible, they're given a caseload manager, which oftentimes is the special education teacher, whoever their special ed teacher is. There are other instances where, like in the state of Texas, they have what's called an ARD facilitator. I always forget what ARD stands for, but it's basically the IEP facilitator.
Okay.
It's an annual renewal and dismissal or something like that. I don't know. But they are kind of like the person who runs the meetings and all of that. But most of the times, your caseload manager is going to be your special education teacher. So your child's caseload manager is going to change as they go through different grade levels, different schools.
Yeah.
So once the child is on our caseload, that is when we're going to provide all the lesson planning to them. We're going to give them all of their accommodations, their modifications, the specially designed instruction, which is that special instruction that students need. So let's just say that your student in math is just struggling with learning how to add. And that's what the general education classroom is working on in first grade, but your child is still really struggling to even know what a number is. So the special education teacher is going to provide that special instruction for helping your child learning how to know what the numbers are and learn then. If you put up one finger, that means one. If I put up three fingers, that's 1, 2, 3, right? That's one-to-one correspondence. So we're going to work on all of these skills that your child needs that align with what their peers are working on in that first grade classroom. And so that's called SDI, specially designed instruction.
Okay.
And that is the purpose of what special education is. That's what makes special education special. General education students cannot receive SDI. It's only for students that have IEPs. And so from there, then, we're going to provide, if they're going out into a general education classroom for inclusion or doing anything with their peers, going on a field trip, we're going to provide our supports to them and their services as well in that setting. And so we're not just working with your student in our classroom, we're really helping them access all of the things throughout their entire day while they're at school. But we're also doing this for all of our students that are on our caseload. So the average caseload in the United States for a special education teacher is 17 students. However, our resource teachers, if you're in high school, I have had caseloads of over 60 students.
Wow.
So
that's just not realistic. I mean,
correct. Yeah, it's very unfair. And so what I would love for parents to know is that we are doing the best with what we're given. We also, when you hear at an IEP meeting, oh, it's not in the budget, we can't do that. One, they can't say that. That's a whole other podcast episode. But
okay.
We are hearing that too as teachers. They're like, oh no, that's not in the budget to get that curriculum for that child or provide. Like, we are also fighting just as hard as you are for your child, but we're also doing it for our entire caseload. And so I think just remembering that as a parent coming into things is we're going to fight with you as hard as we possibly can for everything that your child needs and deserves. But we are again, also doing it for dozens of other students that we are servicing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a full plate. So with that being said, would one of your pieces of advice for parents be the squeaky wheel? I mean, it sounds simple, but this is one of my confessions that I talked about earlier, is I felt like we were too passive in our approach, that we just kind of trusted the process in a way. And unfortunately, our son paid the price in terms of not getting access to general education curriculum that he deserved for too long. Talk about just being the squeaky wheel.
Yep.
And
yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. I even as the like teachers, as the teacher, I even tell other teachers, like if there is something that you need for the student and you as advocating for your child, that student on your caseload, and the school's like, nope, we're not doing it. Like it's not in the budget. I can't get that. I always go be the little birdie in the parent's ear. And I'm like, hey, because parents have more pull on the IEP team than schools will ever let out to let them say. So oftentimes, if teachers need something, I will go to the parent and say, you didn't hear this from me, but here's, blah, 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 blah. They're not giving Stephanie this. We need this specific, whatever it is that she needs a slant board. And I can't, I've been pushing, I've shown the data. Here's all the things that I have. I will let the parent know, and then the parent can write an email, request a meeting,
Press
because
pressure,
I'll have
put the
the
pressure
data.
on their side.
Right. I'll have the data to back it up.
Yeah.
But if it comes from the parent, it's oftentimes better received than if it comes from me as the teacher. So parents, don't be afraid to ask your child's teacher or teachers, like, what do you need? Like, what do you specifically need to help Stephanie succeed in the classroom? Like, is there something that the district won't give you or give you access to,
No,
or
that's good.
why? Like, I want to work with you. I don't want to work against you. And so when teachers and parents work together, we actually make a much better team. And I'm all for that collaboration. Um, and so we can work together in the way teachers can say, hey, I need this. Can you I'll even draft the email for you. Can you just send it?
Oh, that's great.
Or parents be like, hey, what do you guys need? Do you need these work really well for Stephanie at home, like this little fidget thing. Maybe we can get some with some type of, I don't want to say the word budget because everything we don't have it in the budget. But
Right.
parents, when it comes from you, oftentimes it's much better received.
How how much is too much when it comes to communication between parents and teachers, in your opinion?
I think that honestly depends on the dynamic between the parent and the teacher. And I think only that dynamic can be answered by that teacher and that parent. I will say my boundary is I have shared my personal cell phone number with parents. And my boundary is you're not allowed to FaceTime me school hours
Yeah.
or at all. You're welcome to text me all hours of the day outside of contract time. Um, if it's an absolute emergency, I will do my best to get to you, and help you with what you're going through at home. But I also have my own family and my own things after contract
Yeah.
hours too. So me saying that though to other teachers, they might be like, nope, I'm not sharing my personal cell phone.
Right. Not
That's never
happening.
happening. So for me, it just, and also honestly depends on the relationship I have with the parent.
Sure.
So it really depends on the
But
situation.
but more is better than none. And I'm curious,
Correct.
in
Yeah.
your experience, did that ever surprise you, in terms of maybe the lack of involvement that some parents had in the IEP process or even the education
Yeah.
process for their students?
Yeah, there were times when I would have parents who just never showed up to IEP meetings or, were no part of the process at all. You would just send the IEP home, they'd sign it and send it back, and that would be it. But I've also learned in those moments, as teachers, I love reading books that are for parents of children with disabilities because it gives me that perspective, right? I don't have that perspective. I want to collaborate with you, but it also now my perspective has changed in thinking oh, that parent doesn't care,
Right.
to that parent has so much else going. They might have other kids. They
Yep.
might have a disability themselves. They may have a PTSD of something from happened with school with them. English may be their second language and they don't they're intimidated by the process, or,
They
maybe
might be intimidated without English
right.
being a second language,
Maybe
right?
they're
Because it
taking
can be intimidating.
maybe they're taking care of a sick family member or taking
Right.
care of an adult, whatever it may be. There's so many things going on in the home life that as teachers, we don't know or have access to. And it is not my job to judge them for not showing up for the meeting. It does not mean they don't care, because there have also been instances where I've had parents not show up, not fill anything out to help me or whatever. But then at the end of the year, they're like, thank you so much for sending all of those notes. Like, I really appreciated having you as like my child's teacher. And so they're reading the notes, they're seeing everything, but just because they're not responding back to you doesn't mean they're not reading it. And so my perspective as a teacher has changed over the years in that, and just being more understanding and non-judgmental of parents not being a part of the process. It's a lot. It's a lot as a teacher. I know that it's a lot as a parent as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Come along those lines. And so you've got your IEP and you're communicating at whatever level you can, but maybe what are some signs that maybe the IEP could be going off track, or
Ooh,
or maybe could
flags.
potentially be harming the child, like so off track,
Yeah.
like this is, what are signs that parents should look for there?
I think I'm going to call them red flags.
Yeah.
I think the red flags that we should look for is no progress. When you get progress reports,
Yeah.
or even if you're getting like a daily communication notebook, or you're getting emails saying, oh, your child did this today, or oh, we had a really bad behavior. If you're constantly getting those emails and nothing is changing, that's a huge red flag. Um, and honestly, I think that's probably the biggest red flag. If you're not seeing any progress, or we're seeing regression where they're,
Right.
regressing back in whatever the skill is, I think that that's a huge red flag. And that means something at within the IEP isn't working. And so we need to make a change and either add some service minutes or change out an accommodation, or, whatever it may be. But I think that's probably the biggest one, is no progress or regression. And you don't have to wait till progress report time to get that data.
That was going to be my next question, is
Yeah.
how long do you give it? Like, is it,
Yeah.
I mean, you should be seeing progress at certain stages, right?
Yep.
I mean, whatever that may be, quarterly.
Yeah. You should absolutely now. mm, oh, we're going to talk about data now, and there's so many things that we could do. So it's important to remember though that so let's say we have that math IEP goal, okay, where we were talking about single digit addition, child's in first grade, but we're working on just identifying numbers. Between identifying numbers and single digit addition, there are a bunch of different skills that our students need to master to even be able to begin addition, right? And so if you're not seeing progress, the first thing I would ask your child's IEP team or teacher is, just ask clarifying questions. I love a good clarifying question, because I'm putting the onus on me. Like, I'm just trying to understand what this says. I don't understand. And it puts everything on me, and it's very
You're not,
non-confrontational.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're not coming out of the gates
right.
blaming, like, why isn't this happening?
Yep.
Or,
And I even say that. I'll start the whole conversation, clarifying question.
yeah, right.
To let them know, like, white flag, like, I'm just trying to understand it because I don't get it. So, clarifying question, can you explain to me or show me the raw data for the progress we're making for this IEP goal? I know we want to have Stephanie do single digit addition by the end of the year, or this annual IEP, but we're still working on identifying numbers. It's been a whole marking period. Like, can you explain to me the steps that we're taking to get to single digit
That's
addition?
good. Yeah.
Because maybe in the progress report, you're seeing still not mastered single digit addition, but we might be like 4 prerequisite skills behind, which is not a bad thing, but we might be working on a prerequisite skill that they have to know first before they can get there. And so on the teacher side of things, they should be letting you know that. But if they're not, you can ask clarifying question. Can you just explain to me where we are in the progress of this goal? Like, what are we currently working on, and how well or not well is Stephanie doing with this right now? So I think that's the first thing. I think then if you're seeing the red flag where there's no progress, to me, I feel like 3 to 4 weeks is sufficient. A lot of schools
Okay,
say
that's good.
6 to 8.
Yeah.
I think within 3 to 4, you're going to know. Um, for
I
most
like
schools.
that. I
Yeah.
think that's good because, again, I think, and maybe it's just my projection, my own experience, the expectations are too low sometimes for
Yeah.
parents. And they'll be like I said, they'll be thinking, oh, we should see these see
Mm-hmm.
progress quarterly or,
Yep.
after like it's or even like every 6 months. But you're suggesting, and again, I like this. I would push for the same if I could do it over again. Like you said, every month or
Yeah.
every 2 months, really kind of keep your eye on the ball there for these progress reports and what
And
could be
parents,
done.
you can request that and have that ran into the IEP for you, that you receive progress reports monthly, or that you receive communication about progress monthly or biweekly or every week. Like you can absolutely request that as the parent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. What was your experience? Now, I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but like I said, my son's 19, autistic, non-speaker, so for many years was unable to communicate, um, unable to take standardized tests. So that really kind of created this challenge, right? And it turned out that his cognitive abilities was vastly underrated because of these challenges, and it was only alleviated when he was able to communicate using a letterboard.
Hmm.
Do you have experience working with, non-speaking or minimally speaking autistic students, and kind of what are your thoughts in terms of how maybe we can be going about educating and accommodating them better in schools?
Yeah, and when I taught in a self-contained unit, and even my very first year I taught extended school year, I had an autism support unit and we had some non-speaking students in there. And so when I taught in a self-contained unit, I learned about core vocabulary and core boards, which you can see on your phone, right? They have apps for that. It's
Yeah,
also can be just a piece of paper that you have, like the school can provide it for you with different icons on it for them to point to what they want to say. And so when I taught in that self-contained unit, I had the majority of my students were nonverbal. They had high support needs for communication. And so we were using Go Talk 32s. We had a Go Talk
Hmm.
9 or like a 12 or whatever it was. And then we had some students on tablets. And so we had the core boards, and we ended up putting core boards in all like in the hallways in the school. We had them in the lunchroom, in all of the specials rooms, and all the gen ed rooms that our students were in. We had them taped on their desks so that they always had access to it. But I honestly didn't know anything about them until I had students who were nonverbal in my classroom. Um, but now, like having had that experience, I actually,
Yeah,
before we hopped on this podcast, filmed a YouTube training about making your classroom inclusive. And that's always one of my tips is have core boards up in your classrooms, have them in the hallways, have them, if you can, have them on the playground, put them on a clipboard, even if you don't have the big, playground sign. I just think it's so important, and not just for our students that have disabilities, but for our students that are neurotypical to see that and understand it and be able to
yeah.
help other individuals use those to communicate. Um, and so not make it such a like, why are you carrying that around kind of thing? Being like, oh, do you want to go play on the slide? And then waiting for the student to point to yes or hit yes, or no. Um, so I'm all about a good core board vocabulary, like fringe vocabulary. Yeah.
Well, what I love is you've taken the approach by advocating this and having this yourself. It sounds like you've presumed competence, which is
Yes.
again, and I think that's a huge obstacle that's been faced
Yeah.
by non-speakers, and again, including my son and many others, right? Is that because they are not able to communicate reliably because of apraxia and other issues,
Hmm.
that the assumption was, oh, they're intellectually disabled, they're not capable
Yeah.
of making decisions or communicating or even learning general
Yeah.
curriculum, which is a huge disservice to them.
Yes. Agree. Agree.
Yeah.
I've also been learning a lot about how our evaluations are kind of skewed for our students who have high support needs for communication. So that could be a whole other podcast episode, though.
Absolutely. No, you're right. No, I'm glad you brought that up because that's
Yeah.
a huge point, and it's something I've talked about before in this podcast. And again, I'll just reiterate the best example again when we're talking about apraxia, which the majority of these non-speakers have, which is the brain body disconnect, is their bodies do things totally separate from what their brain intends. So when you give them a test, a multiple choice test and their brain is saying, oh, I know the answer, it's A, but their
Mm-hmm.
body presses D and the whole test is like that and they end up with a 20% score. That's totally skewed against them,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't measure their competency. But you're right, that could be another podcast. Let's talk about let's move on to the intentional IEP. You
Yeah.
talked about this a little bit. What was the spark for the project, and kind of how has it grown beyond your original expectations?
Yeah. So the original thought behind this was I love writing IEPs, and I know that
The
my hope
data
was,
nerd, right?
yes, 100%. I've always owned it. Data nerd. Oh, I could literally dissect data all day long. And so I know that I, again, am the weirdo in I pulled about 4,000 special education teachers before I built the intentional IEP. And it was, I think the stat was like 64 or 65% of special education teachers hate writing IEPs. And it's not because they don't want to. It's just because they're like 40-page documents in some states and there's so much data and we don't have the time to do all of the things to accurately like spend as much time as we need to. And so it takes away from the actual teaching, which is what we got into this to do, right? And so my thought was with the intentional IEP is all of these teachers hate writing IEPs because they're not ever given enough time to do so. If I can provide them with the systems that I've created for myself out of my love of doing it, they may not ever love writing IEPs, and I'm completely okay with that.
Right.
But at least they'll be more effective and efficient at writing them and get to spend more time with their students, which is what they got into teaching to do. And so the intentional IEP started with providing teachers with an IEP goal bank. And then over the years, I was like, this just isn't enough. Like giving them a goal bank, like I want to do more. And so now we have like member resources, we have expert led trainings. We do a summer PD series every summer for parents and teachers about all different aspects of the IEP writing world. We have our book now, we have a podcast as
Right.
well. And so it's just grown over the last 5 years. And I'm really proud of, you know, everyone that's been a part of it. We've had over 5,500 members inside of the intentional IEP.
Wow, that's
And
great.
so we've served about 77,000 students with the intentional IEP in the last 5 years.
With more to come. And that was one
Yeah.
of the points I wanted to make. Again, so your
Hmm.
audiences are both teachers and parents. You
Yes.
you serve both.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
try to do my best to do both. It's mostly teachers, but again, I strongly believe that parents and teachers need to work together throughout the IEP process because that's when our students are really going to thrive and be the most successful. And so we can't see it as like, oh, we're not on the same side of the table because we truly are. We are on the same side. We all want the same thing, and that's what's best for the student. And so when we work together, it just makes everything fall into place and a lot easier.
Well, I think a lot of parents just simply don't know that there are resources like you
Yeah.
available. I mean, again, it's such an isolating feeling often
Yeah.
when you're in that role. You feel like you're on your own, you're on the island,
Yeah.
choose your metaphor. Um, and then, so it's great to know that there are, professional resources like you who are out there who can help. And again, who've been a teacher yourself. And like I said,
Yeah.
I wish I knew you 10 years ago because we really could have used that kind of help and support when we're going through this because it just it becomes kind of numbing in a
Yeah.
way, especially when you're in a situation like ours. Again, it's a little different with, like I said, non-speaking, where you're not able to make progress against this IEP goals because of the way it's structured, as we had talked
Yeah.
about. And so you do kind of tune it out after a while, which you feel bad about as a parent. But
Yeah.
if we had someone like you could say, well, hey, have you tried this approach? Or,
Hmm.
here's something else you could think about, or really kind of, work together. So I love that.
Well, thank you.
What, this is a question I always love to ask. What gives you
Yeah.
hope right now?
Oh, I think special education is so tough right now, just with the general state of education, um, and just the burnout that special education teachers are feeling, and droves of teachers leaving the profession just because of
Yeah.
the demands that we see and we have daily. And I think my hope is just I actually just came home from a teaching conference in Dallas last week, and It was 6,500 teachers, not all special ed, mostly general education teachers that were just so passionate about teaching. And I think that truly just gives me hope. Like, I've been in this for 15 years now, and I see the burnout. I've been the burnout, but I've also been that new teacher who was so excited. And I've also am now, like, I still love what I do every single day. I'm excited to come into my office and make data sheets and film trainings and do podcast and like do all the things. And so I think it just gives me hope that just the new wave of teachers coming in see things a lot differently than like when we were in school. And that truly just does give me hope, because I think that it's not going to be just us that's changing. It's going to be the new teachers coming in, right? It's going to be all of us together making change. And so I mean that they're giving me a lot of hope because they truly are just in it for the right reasons.
That's great. We need that. We need that
Yeah.
fresh blood. We need that idealism. We need that passion, right?
Yeah.
Because, like you said, it's not an easy profession,
Yeah.
despite what some people may believe. The whole jokes about summers off. I mean, my brother just retired. He was a public school teacher for 30 years,
Yeah.
and I know the time and effort it goes into it. Come along those topics again, because we may have teachers and educators listening.
Hmm.
What advice would you have to them to try to avoid the burnout, to try to make sure that they aren't overcome with
Yeah.
all the stuff that comes with it?
I think the biggest thing, and I'm speaking to my first year teacher self in this too, is setting boundaries. Because I was someone who would go in like an hour before the school day started to do things because I'm a morning person. I'm not going to say after the bell because like I'm going to go home and eat. Like I want to go home and have dinner, right? But setting your boundaries. So whether that means you go in early or you stay late, what does that mean for you? Maybe it means not having your school email on your phone, or maybe that means you do stay till 6 o'clock, 2 nights a week. Maybe it means you are okay with taking papers home to grade. Everybody's boundaries for their work-life balance are going to be
Yeah,
different, especially when you have kids or don't have kids or you're married or not married. Like what works for one person may not work for another. So I think just setting those boundaries really early on and figuring out what that means for you. And then also having an avenue for you to be able to prioritize what needs done now, what can get done later, and what doesn't need done at all. Because in this world of social media, we see
the day,
everything as this.
the day. Hi, Stone. Hello. Yeah, Stone. He likes to make his appearance during the podcast.
Hello.
Hey,
But
the
I
day.
think in this world where everything has to be Pinterest perfect and we have to
Mm,
spend all this extra money and do all of these things and everything has to be laminated and I think if we can prioritize like no, what actually needs to be done first to meet my students' needs and fulfill my duties per my job description, what can I do later that's not like extremely needs done right now, like writing that IEP, right? Like that is a priority
yeah.
first. And then things that you're like, yeah, I could do that bulletin board, but like it's not as important as getting that IEP done. So I think boundaries and then realizing what priorities need to be set, I think is going to take you a long way and help you fight that burnout.
Yeah, that's great advice for a lot of professions, Stephanie, actually,
Yeah.
because again, it's the work, it's never ending
Yeah.
in so many of our professions. There's always something more that can be done.
Yeah.
And so I think having those boundaries and learning how to say no, that's really great advice.
Yeah.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and segue into the segments that we like to have every week. We're going to kick things off with our autism tip of the week.
Hey parents, gather around, it's time to speak. We're here with your tip of the week. Strategies and wisdom just for you. Autism parents, we know what you go through.
Do you have a tip of the week that you want to share?
Yeah, I think it actually kind of aligns, and I may have already said this in here, but the IEP is a living, breathing document, so it can be changed at any time.
That's
The
good.
parent can call an IEP meeting at any time, request the raw data to see it at any time. I suggest always putting it in writing because then there's a paper trail. But
Absolutely.
yeah, anything can be changed at any time. Nothing is set in stone.
Along those lines, my tip of the week has to do with IEP. And we talked about this a little bit, but making sure that some of the goals can be measurable. that
Yes.
there are things that, again, that there's data, right? But for the data nerd, that can be measured, and also that it reflects real academic growth, not just minimal compliance, which unfortunately, again, I think sometimes can be the case of, shoot for the ceiling, not the floor when it comes
Hmm.
to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, our next segment, autism fact or fiction.
Get QuickTime ready, and here we go. This is Autism Fact or Fiction. We're breaking down what's real, what's rumor, and what might surprise you. Let's go.
All right. And for this one, I do have something that is autism fact or fiction. The statement is, if a child isn't making progress on their IEP goals, the school is legally required to change the plan or services. Is that fact or fiction, Stephanie?
That is fact.
Yeah, it's fact. And I know you can expand on this, but in general, under IDEA, which you had talked about before, the lack of progress means the IEP should and must be revised. It could mean updating goals, new supports, different approaches. It is a legal obligation, not just a recommendation.
Yes. And that goes for year to year too, with updating IEP goals to kind of piggyback off what you were saying about making sure IEP goals are measurable. Having the same goal maybe 2 years in a row or 3 years in a row. I don't recommend that either. Because if we're not meeting it in a year, something needs to change. We can still work on the skill, but we need some different supports, different measurements, different something
So
in there because what wasn't working last time.
something ain't working there,
Yep.
and needs to be fixed.
Yep.
All right, our third segment. This is the parent confession.
Morning routines can go astray. Found socks in the fridge one day. Laughter's the best remedy. Hey, we're just finding our own way. Mom, dad confessions every week. Sharing joys and moments we seek. Honest tales that make us unique. Join the club, we're never meek.
This is the time when we get to show our human side, things that we've
Yeah.
done that again, kind of let people know they're not alone. Do you have any parent confessions?
Oh, parent confessions?
Or yeah, or in this case, it could be educator confessions. We're open. It could be
You
whatever.
know, so my son, he just turned 19 months old, and
Mm,
we think we're almost like in the potty training stage, and it is confession absolutely intimidating me. I've helped students in my classroom with potty training, but like
I
with
love
my
it.
son, I'm like, I don't know, what do I do? Like, do I just sit him on the potty? Like, is he just gonna go his home? Like, absolutely intimidating. No idea what to do. Like, I lost every brain cell in my brain, got nothing. Like,
I love it. Oh,
terrible.
that's great. Well, that's perfect because again,
Yeah,
that's what it's all about, right? And we're all human, and a lot of these it's parenting's hard,
it
right?
is.
Let's Yeah, it's great, it's rewarding, it's you name it, but there's a lot of this is hard. And again, for parents of kids who have just different disabilities, you're talking about potty training. That was a big one with a son with autism. It took longer than he's a twin, so we kind of had these different benchmarks to
Yeah.
measure against, which made it interesting. But that definitely, man, I feel for you. That's a big one. But you know what? Like it's great. You'll get over it and you'll be like,
Yeah.
all right, let's move on. Like, next one.
Wasn't so bad.
Wasn't so bad. No, you just remember that phase and you move on. And with me, I kind of talked about before was the IEP guilt. Looking back and like I said, wishing that I was more involved in the IEP progress, especially given you said something I wanted to expand on a little earlier and just kind of reinforce. You talked about again, the parent is more influential than they realize
Hmm.
in the process. And a lot of times these teams will not make you feel that way. They'll
Yeah.
try to minimize your involvement,
Hmm.
unfortunately, which is the case.
Yeah.
And it's, I think that's kind of doubly worse or however you want to say it, if you're trusting the process, so it makes it easier for you to feel like, oh, okay, things are under control or things
Yeah.
are, going the way they should when they're not. And the red flags that you had identified and all those. I mean, I'm just going to encourage everyone, stay on top of it and stay involved. I mean, just really, it's you're the one who's ultimately in charge of your child's education. These are professionals, and like I said, teachers, the majority of them just, have hearts of gold and they want the best, but, they're not perfect. And they have a lot of demands, as you had mentioned.
Yeah.
So.
I think informed trust is what I would call it. Definitely
Ooh, I like
trust the
that.
process, but come informed so that if admin says, oh, we're not doing that, or oh, that's not in the budget, or we don't do that here, or whatever version of that may come out of their mouth, you can say, oh, but per the IDEA, like I know this. Or you can even say, okay, well, I would like to table this meeting. I would like for you to write that you're refusing to provide the service in the prior written notice. Let's reschedule a meeting. And then that gives you time to do a little bit of research and come back to the table with things. So definitely
I love that.
trust. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Stephanie. You've got to kind of wield the legal axe as well sometimes, right? Like you said, and as much as you can, people really try to understand your children's rights for IDEA, but also ADA. That's something else that I've really been preaching to, that schools, public schools in particular, have a legal obligation to accommodate your child and provide whatever accommodations necessary for you, whether it's for communication or education, whatever it will be. Really take the time to learn those and use those in these meetings, because they're a right. You're not asking for special favors.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, thank you. As we had predicted, like I said, I know we could go on and on. We're going to have maybe a part 2 later, but this was really, I appreciate your candor. You have really great practical human tips for all of us. Where can folks find you, follow your work, get connected with you and the Intentional IEP?
Yeah. So thank you again so much for having me. And thank you for everything that you're doing within the special education community, especially for parents. It's so, so needed. If you want to connect with me, you can find me on all the platforms except TikTok. I'm too old for TikTok. At the Intentional IEP, theintentionaliep.com, Facebook, Instagram, podcast is the Intentional IEP. The book is called The Intentional IEP. So anything, just type the Intentional IEP into Google and it'll take you to all the things.
Awesome. That's great. Well, again, I think you're a wonderful resource. Really appreciate having you here. For all the listeners, viewers, if you like this episode, again, asking you to share it with fellow parents, teachers, or advocates. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review. Every star helps spread these conversations even further. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.